Ainsley Patterson, 34, stared at the iPhone boxes in her niece and nephew's hands, the $2,000 worth of technology glinting under the Christmas tree lights. Mom had promised everyone small meaningful gifts only this year, yet here were Ainsley's sister Brooke's kids squealing with delight, while Ainsley's own children clutched their $20 bookstore gift cards. The betrayal stung worse than any argument they'd ever had, but Mom had no idea the storm of family secrets this favoritism would ultimately unleash. Before I dive into how this Christmas morning changed my family forever, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. If you enjoy family drama with unexpected twists, please hit that subscribe button and like this video. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to see how karma eventually caught up with my mom and sister in ways none of us could have predicted. Family loyalty isn't always what it seems. Growing up in suburban Connecticut, our family portrait seemed pristine to outsiders. I was the responsible older daughter who followed all the rules, graduated with honors, married my college sweetheart. Derek had two well-behaved children, Emma 10 and Lucas 8, and worked my way up to regional manager at a marketing firm. My sister Brooke, 3 years younger, took a different path. She dropped out of college after an unplanned pregnancy, cycled through a series of boyfriends, and relied heavily on our parents' financial support to raise her children, Maddie 12 and Tyler 9. Despite these differences, I believed wholeheartedly that our parents loved us equally. Dad was always fair-minded, though he often deferred to Mom in family matters. Mom Catherine Patterson, retired elementary school principal, maintained that family came above all else. Blood is thicker than water, she'd repeat whenever conflicts arose, reminding us that family loyalty was sacrosanct. We gathered every Sunday for dinner at my parents' colonial-style home, where Mom would preside over perfectly roasted meals and family discussions. These dinners were mandatory. Missing one, without a legitimate excuse, would trigger passive-aggressive text messages and thinly veiled disappointment. I rarely challenged this dynamic, believing it kept our family strong. When small instances of favoritism occurred, like Mom watching Brooke's kids more often, or slipping her extra money, I rationalized them away. Brooke needed more help as a single mother. It made logical sense. The previous Thanksgiving, Mom had announced a new Christmas approach. With inflation and everything costing more these days, I think we should scale back this year. Small, meaningful gifts, only $25 maximum per person. Everyone had agreed enthusiastically. Derek and I were secretly relieved, since we'd been saving for a kitchen renovation. Dad nodded approvingly, always the budget-conscious engineer. Even Brooke seemed on board, though her financial situation had recently improved when she'd started dating Richard, a successful real estate developer. In the weeks leading up to Christmas, I carefully selected thoughtful, budget-conscious gifts, personalized bookmarks with gift cards for my parents, handcrafted coffee mugs for Brooke, and educational games for her children. I helped Emma and Lucas make homemade ornaments for their grandparents and special drawings for their cousins. We wrapped everything in recycled paper, adding handwritten notes to emphasize the meaning behind each gift, rather than its monetary value. The night before Christmas, I called Mom to confirm our arrival time. She sounded distracted, but assured me everything was set for our traditional Christmas breakfast, followed by gift exchange. Remember, nothing extravagant this year, I reminded her. The kids understand it's about being together, not expensive presents. Of course, dear, she replied. Small, meaningful gifts only. I haven't forgotten. That night, I went to bed feeling content. Our family was choosing values over materialism, teaching the children an important lesson about what really matters during the holidays. I had no idea that the next morning would shatter my lifelong trust in my mother and reveal the painful truth about where I truly stood in our family hierarchy. As I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't have imagined how a simple gift exchange would expose decades of hidden resentments and unleash a chain of events that would permanently realign our family dynamics. The perfect Patterson family facade was about to crack wide open, revealing the complicated, messy truth that had been lurking beneath the surface all along. Christmas morning began with such promise. Derek and I woke early, watching Emma and Lucas's eyes light up as they discovered their modest stockings filled with candies, small toys, and handwritten adventure coupons promising special outings with us in the coming year. We'd been transparent about the scaled-back Christmas, and they'd embraced it with surprising maturity. "Remember," I reminded them as we loaded the car with our carefully wrapped packages, "Grandma said small gifts for everyone this year. The important thing is being together." They nodded solemnly. Emma, ever perceptive, added, "Plus, we're saving for the new kitchen, right, Mom?" The 30-minute drive to my parents' house was filled with Christmas music and excited chatter. Snow dusted the suburban landscape, creating the perfect holiday backdrop. When we arrived, Dad greeted us with warm hugs, while Mom busied herself in the kitchen, putting final touches on her famous cinnamon rolls. "Merry Christmas, Pumpkin," Dad said, using my childhood nickname. "Brooke and the kids are already here, Richard too." I noticed something odd in Dad's expression, a tightness around his eyes, a forced quality to his smile, but dismissed it as holiday stress. We entered the living room to find Brooke and Richard cozied up on the sofa, mimosas in hand. My niece and nephew were suspiciously quiet, exchanging secretive glances. Breakfast passed pleasantly enough though. Mom seemed unusually eager to move on to the gift exchange. "Let's get to the presents," she announced the moment the last bite of cinnamon roll was consumed. We gathered around the Christmas tree, its base surrounded by packages of varying sizes. I noticed immediately that some looked significantly larger and more elaborately wrapped than what our $25 maximum agreement should have produced, but held my tongue. Perhaps they were just bulky items or contained multiple small things. As tradition dictated, the youngest went first. Tyler Brooks' 9-year-old son selected a large professionally wrapped box with his name. His hands shook with anticipation as he tore off the paper. "An iPhone 13. He shrieked, holding up the unmistakable box. "Thanks, Grandma and Grandpa." My stomach dropped. An iPhone, that was at least $700, far beyond our agreed limit. I glanced at Derek, whose raised eyebrows mirrored my confusion. "Mom," I questioned softly. "Just wait," she whispered, patting my hand dismissively. Next came Maddie Brooks' 12-year-old, who opened an identical box with identical results. 2 iPhones. Nearly $1,500 spent on just 2 gifts. My children watched wide-eyed, clearly recalibrating their expectations. Lucas whispered, "Mom, do you think Grandma got us phones too?" Before I could respond, Mom handed gifts to my children. Emma's face fell slightly when she unwrapped a $20 Barnes & Noble gift card and a knitted scarf. Lucas received a similar gift card and a science kit that I recognized from the clearance section at Target. Both gifts were lovely but unmistakably within the agreed-upon budget, unlike their cousins' extravagant presents. "Say thank you to Grandma and Grandpa," I prompted automatically, my voice strained. As the gift exchange continued, the pattern became unmistakable. Brooke received a designer handbag. Richard, despite being a new addition to our family, got an expensive watch. Derek and I received modest gifts clearly purchased. With the $25 limit in mind, a barbecue cookbook for him, a scented candle for me. Throughout this uncomfortable display, Mom avoided my gaze while Dad looked increasingly uncomfortable. Brooke, on the other hand, seemed completely unfazed by the obvious discrepancy, helping her children activate their new phones as if nothing were amiss. When the last gift had been opened, Mom stood up briskly. "Who's ready for more coffee? And I've got cookies in the kitchen." As she bustled away, I followed her, my hands shaking slightly with the effort to contain my emotions. "Mom," I said quietly once we were alone, "I thought we agreed on small gifts only, $25 maximum." She busied herself with the coffee pot. "Well, yes, that was the general idea." "Then why did Brooke's kids get iPhones? Those cost hundreds of dollars each." Mom turned to face me, her expression hardening in a way I'd rarely seen. Ainsley Brooks' children don't have the advantages yours do. They don't have two parents with stable incomes. They don't have a big house in a good school district. But Mom, that's not. Besides, she continued as if I hadn't spoken, it's my money to spend as I see fit. Brooke needs more help than you do. You've always been the self-sufficient one. In that moment something crystallized for me. All these years I'd interpreted self-sufficient as a compliment, a recognition of my hard work and responsibility. Now I understood it differently. My self-sufficiency had become an excuse to give me less attention, less support, less love. The realization must have shown on my face because Mom's expression softened slightly. Oh, don't make this into a big deal, Ainsley. It's just presence. You're too sensitive, always have been. As I stood there in my mother's kitchen, the scent of Christmas cookies suddenly cloying, I felt decades of family dynamics shift into a new, uncomfortable clarity. This wasn't just about presents under a tree. This was about a fundamental imbalance that had always been there, one I'd willfully ignored, because acknowledging it was too painful. I returned to the living room with a plastered smile, determined not to ruin Christmas for my children. But inside, a slow-burning fuse had been lit, one that would ultimately expose far more than just holiday favoritism. The drive home from my parents' house was painfully quiet. Derek occasionally glanced at me, concern etched on his face, but knew better than to broach the subject with the children in the back seat. Emma and Lucas were subdued, their initial excitement about their modest gifts dampened by the stark contrast with their cousin's bounty. "Did you like your science kit, buddy?" Derek asked Lucas, attempting to lighten the mood. "It's okay," Lucas mumbled, staring out the window. "But Grandma gave Tyler a phone. He's younger than me." I winced, unsure how to explain such blatant favoritism to an 8-year-old. Emma, ever my perceptive child, reached over to squeeze her brother's hand. "We'll have fun with your kit together," she promised. "And remember, we're saving for the kitchen renovation. That's more important than phones." My heart swelled with pride at her maturity, even as it ached at the unfairness of the situation. That evening, after the children were in bed, Derek and I sat at our kitchen table, mugs of spiked hot chocolate warming our hands. "I can't believe she did that," I finally said, breaking our silence. "It was so deliberate." Derek nodded slowly. "It wasn't just impulsive either. Those gifts were planned. Your mom had to go purchase those phones in advance, wrap them, knowing full well she was completely disregarding the agreement everyone made, and then to dismiss it, like I was overreacting." I trailed off, remembering my mother's casual dismissal. She said, "Brooke needs more help than I do." She actually used my self-sufficiency against me, like it's a punishment to have my life together. "It's always been this way," Derek said gently. "Your parents, especially your mom, have always favored Brooke. The difference is that now it's so blatant she can't even pretend anymore." I wanted to argue to defend my mother, as I'd done countless times before, but the evidence was too overwhelming to deny. Instead, I said, "I need to look at something," and retrieved a box from our home office. The box contained financial records I'd been organizing for tax purposes, including receipts for expenses we'd covered for my parents over the years. Medical copays we'd handled when Dad had knee surgery. The new water heater we'd purchased when theirs failed last winter. The countless times we'd picked up the check at restaurants, bought groceries, or covered other expenses to ease their retirement budget. "We've given them thousands of dollars in financial support," I said, spreading the receipts across the table. "All while Mom's been slipping extra money to Brooke behind our backs." Derek looked uncomfortable. "There's something else you should know," he said hesitantly. "I wasn't going to tell you because I didn't want to hurt you, but after today," my stomach tightened. "What is it?" "Remember when we were saving for our down payment and we were about $5,000 short? I overheard your mom telling Brooke that she'd just given her $10,000 to catch up on bills. This was the same week she told us she couldn't help with our house because money was too tight. The betrayal cut deep. We'd delayed buying our home by nearly a year to save that additional money, working overtime and sacrificing vacations. While my sister had apparently received double what we'd needed, no questions asked. "I need to see their will," I said suddenly. Derek looked startled. "What? Why?" "Just a hunch," I replied, though it was more than that. A sickening suspicion was forming in my mind, connecting disparate dots from over the years. The next day, I called my father under the pretense of having a question about his health insurance. While he searched for the policy information, I casually asked, "Dad, I've been updating our will since the kitchen renovation is increasing our home's value. Do you and Mom have any advice on how you structured yours?" Dad, always pragmatic about financial matters, didn't hesitate. "We've kept it simple. The house and bulk of our assets go to Brooke to help with the kids since she's had a tougher go of things. We've set aside that antique jewelry collection your grandmother left for you. Mom thought that was fitting since you've always been interested in family history." The grandmother's jewelry he referred to had been appraised years ago at about $3,000, a fraction of my parents' estate, which included their fully paid home in an expensive neighborhood and substantial retirement accounts. "I see," I managed to respond calmly, though my hand had tightened around the phone. "That makes sense." After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence. The Christmas gifts weren't an isolated incident, but part of a larger pattern, a pattern I'd been too loyal, too trusting to recognize. That night, unable to sleep, I found myself searching through old family photos on my laptop. Something compelled me to open a folder of scanned documents, birth certificates, old school records, and other family paperwork I'd organized during a genealogy project years earlier. Among them was my parents' marriage certificate. I'd glanced at it before without paying much attention, but now I noticed something odd. They'd been married in June 1988, but I was born in January 1989, just 7 months later. By itself, this wasn't remarkable. Plenty of couples conceive before marriage. But a gnawing suspicion led me to check Brooke's birth certificate against their wedding date. She had been born in April 1992, exactly 3 years and 10 months after their wedding. A perfectly planned, likely intentional pregnancy. I sat back, pieces falling into place. I'd always known I was an unexpected blessing, as Mom euphemistically put it. But now I wondered, was I more than unexpected? Was I unwanted? I opened my email and composed a message to my father's sister, Aunt Judith, who had always been slightly estranged from our family. "I need to talk to you about something important," I wrote. "It's about my birth and my parents' marriage. I think there's a story I haven't been told." Her response came the following morning. "I've been waiting 34 years for this conversation. Call me." The call I made that afternoon would change everything I thought I knew about my family, and set in motion a reckoning none of us could have anticipated. Aunt Judith answered on the first ring, as if she'd been waiting by the phone. "Ainsley," she said, her voice both warm and cautious. "I'm glad you reached out." I sat at my kitchen table, a cup of tea growing cold beside me. The house was empty. Derek had taken the kids sledding to give me privacy for this call. "Thanks for making time to talk," I began, suddenly uncertain how to proceed. "I've been noticing some patterns in how my mother treats me versus Brooke. And I found some discrepancies in the dates on their marriage certificate." "Your mother didn't want to keep you," Aunt Judith said, bluntly cutting through my careful preamble. "I'm sorry to be so direct, but you're asking questions that deserve honest answers." The words hit like a physical blow. I'd suspected something along these lines, but hearing it confirmed made my chest tighten painfully. "What do you mean?" Catherine was ambitious, finishing her master's degree, starting her career in education administration. "Getting pregnant with you threw a wrench in those plans. She wanted to terminate the pregnancy." I closed my eyes, trying to process this information. "But Dad, your father insisted on keeping you. He threatened to leave if she didn't go through with the pregnancy." They had a huge fight about it, the biggest I'd ever seen. Eventually she agreed, but only after he promised she could go back to work immediately. You were primarily raised by your grandmother for the first 2 years while Catherine finished her degree and started her career. This explained so much. My earliest memories weren't of my mother but of my grandmother's cozy house, the scent of her lavender perfume, the sound of her humming as she cooked. When they decided to have Brooke, Aunt Judith continued, it was completely different. Catherine had established her career by then. The pregnancy was planned down to the month. She took a full year off work after Brooke was born, something she never did with you. I thought of all the subtle differences in our childhood photos, how my mother's smile seemed strained in my baby pictures, but radiant in Brooke's. How there were dozens of photographs documenting every milestone of Brooke's first year, but only a handful from mine. Does Brooke know any of this? I asked. I doubt it. Catherine has spent decades perfecting the image of the perfect mother. She wouldn't risk anything that might tarnish that image. We talked for nearly 2 hours, Aunt Judith filling in gaps in my understanding of my early years. She shared stories of my father bringing me to family events alone because my mother was working, of the tension between my parents that had eventually resolved into an unspoken agreement. My father would be my primary emotional caretaker, while my mother focused more on Brooke. Your father loves you fiercely, Aunt Judith emphasized. He always has. But he's also a conflict avoider who made a devil's bargain to keep his family together. After we hung up, I sat motionless, trying to absorb everything I'd learned. The favoritism I'd experienced wasn't just about Brooke's greater needs or my self-sufficiency, it stemmed from my very existence being unwanted by my mother. Every gift disparity, every overlooked achievement, every time my mother had sided with Brooke in a conflict, all of it cast in a devastating new light. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek, coming home soon. Everything okay? I started to type a response when another message appeared, this one from my mother, thinking about Christmas. Hope you're not still upset about the gifts. You've always been so sensitive. Love you. No acknowledgement of the disparity. No apology. Just another dismissal of my feelings, wrapped in a thin veneer of maternal concern. Something hardened within me. For 34 years I'd been trying to earn the unconditional love my mother had freely given Brooke from birth. I'd been the good daughter, the responsible one, the one who never caused trouble or made waves. And none of it had mattered because the die had been cast before I'd even drawn my first breath. I texted Derek back, I'm okay. Actually, I'm better than okay. I finally understand. When Derek and the children returned rosy-cheeked from their sledding adventure, I met them with a calmness that surprised even me. After the kids were occupied with hot chocolate and a movie, I told Derek everything Aunt Judith had shared. What are you going to do? He asked, when I'd finished. I considered the question carefully. The old Ainsley would have buried this painful truth, continued to seek approval that would never fully come, maintained the facade of family harmony, at the cost of her own well-being. But I wasn't that person anymore. I'm going to talk to my father, I said. Alone. Then, I'm going to decide what kind of relationship I want with my mother going forward, one based on truth, not illusions. Before I continue, I want to thank everyone who stayed with me through this emotional journey. Your support means everything as I share these painful revelations. Have you ever discovered a family secret that changed how you saw your childhood? Drop a comment below, I read every single one. And if you're finding value in my story, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more authentic family stories. Now let's see what happened when I finally confronted my father with what I'd learned. I arranged to meet my father at a quiet coffee shop, halfway between our homes, away from my mother's ever-present influence and my sister's prying eyes. He arrived punctually, as always, his silver hair neatly combed, wearing the cardigan I'd given him last birthday. The familiar scent of his aftershave triggered a rush of childhood memories. Him teaching me to ride a bike, checking my homework, quietly slipping me extra allowance when Mom wasn't looking. "This is a nice surprise," he said, settling into the booth across from me. "Though I sensed from your voice, this isn't just a casual coffee date." I'd rehearsed this conversation countless times over the past 48 hours, but now that the moment had arrived, my carefully prepared script evaporated. Instead, I placed my phone on the table between us, screen displaying the scan of their marriage certificate. "I talked to Aunt Judith," I said simply. The color drained from his face. He reached for his water glass, his hand trembling slightly. "I see. Is it true?" I pressed. "Did Mom want to terminate her pregnancy with me?" He closed his eyes briefly, pain etching deeper lines into his face. When he opened them again, they were filled with resignation and sorrow. "Yes," he admitted quietly. "But Ainsley, it was complicated. Your mother was focused on her career, building her future." "I understand all that," I interrupted. "What I don't understand is why you let her treat me differently my entire life. Why you stood by while she clearly favored Brooke from the moment she was born." Dad's shoulders slumped. I believed I was compensating for it. "I tried to give you extra attention, extra love." "You did," I acknowledged, softening slightly. "And I felt that. But you also enabled Mom's behavior. You let her create this narrative where Brooke always needed more help, more money, more attention, while I was expected to just manage on my own." "Your mother doesn't see it that way," he said, a weak defense that withered under my steady gaze. "The Christmas gifts were just the tipping point, Dad. I know about the will, too." His head snapped up. "How did you? You told me, remember, when I called about the insurance." I leaned forward. "Why would you agree to leave almost everything to Brooke, after a lifetime of me being the responsible one, the one who's actually helped support you both financially over the years?" Dad looked genuinely perplexed. That's not what our will says." Now it was my turn to be confused. "You said the house and bulk of the assets go to Brooke, and I get Grandma's jewelry collection." No, he shook his head vigorously. "The split is even between you both. The house precedes the accounts, everything divided equally. The only special provision is that you get the jewelry, since you've always appreciated family heirlooms more than Brooke has." My mind raced, trying to reconcile this with what he'd told me earlier. "But you specifically said the house and bulk of assets go to Brooke because, and I quote, 'she's had a tougher go of things.'" Dad's expression shifted from confusion to dawning comprehension, then to something resembling horror. "Ainsley, I never said that. Ever." We stared at each other across the table, the implications of this discrepancy hanging in the air between us. Either my father was lying now, or he'd been manipulated into thinking he'd said something he hadn't. "When did you last actually see the will, Dad?" I asked carefully. He frowned. "It's been a while. Catherine handles most of our financial paperwork. She mentioned updating it last year when we refinanced the house, but I never actually reviewed the changes. She said they were just technical updates, nothing substantive." A cold realization settled over me. "I think Mom may have changed the will without telling you." The possibility hung between us, too plausible to dismiss. Dad pulled out his phone with uncharacteristic urgency. "I'm calling Martin right now," he said, referring to their longtime lawyer and friend. I sat in silence as he stepped outside for privacy, watching through the window as his expression morphed from concerned to thunderous. When he returned 10 minutes later, he looked shaken. "The will was changed 14 months ago," he confirmed, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Catherine told Martin I was too busy to come in, but had approved all changes. She forged my signature on the documents." The betrayal was staggering, even after everything else I'd learned. "What are you going to do?" "Fix it immediately," he said, with unexpected firmness. "But Ainsley, there's more." He hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "Your mother has been hiding things from me for years, it seems. Martin mentioned some financial transactions I wasn't aware of, large withdrawals from our joint savings. To help Brooke, I guessed. Some to Brooke, yes. But also significant amounts to an account I don't recognize. He looked bewildered. I need to look into this further. We spent the next 2 hours piecing together years of subtle deceptions. Dad had always trusted Mom with their finances, signing tax returns without scrutiny, accepting her explanations about where money was going. Now, with this new lens of suspicion, he began questioning everything. As our coffee grew cold, Dad reached across the table to take my hand. "I failed you," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "I thought I was protecting our family by avoiding conflict, but I was just enabling Catherine's behavior. You didn't know about the will I offered," trying to ease his obvious guilt. "But I knew about the favoritism," he countered. "I saw it every day and told myself I was balancing it out by giving you extra love." "That wasn't enough, was it?" "No," I admitted, "it wasn't." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of decades of family dysfunction pressing down on us. "What happens now?" I finally asked. Dad straightened something, resolute settling in his expression. "Now I have some difficult conversations with your mother. And I think I need to reevaluate a lot of things." As we prepared to leave, Dad paused. "Ainsley, there's something else you should know. Something I've never told anyone, not even your mother." I waited, bracing myself for yet another revelation. "The day you were born, when they placed you in my arms for the first time," his voice grew thick with emotion, "was the happiest moment of my life. Not one of the happiest, the happiest. Catherine may have seen you as an inconvenience, but I saw you as a miracle. I still do." Tears filled my eyes at this unexpected tenderness. "Thanks, Dad. I'm going to fix this," he promised. "Starting today." As we parted in the parking lot, I felt something shift between us, a new honesty, painful but necessary, that might eventually lead to healing. The confrontation I'd dreaded had become a doorway to a different kind of relationship with my father, one built on truth rather than comfortable illusions. What I didn't know then was that my father's investigation into their finances would uncover secrets far more shocking than we could have imagined, secrets that would ultimately bring my mother's carefully constructed world crashing down around her. 2 weeks after my coffee shop confrontation with Dad, my phone rang at 6:30 a.m. Seeing his name on the screen, I answered immediately, heart racing. "Dad, what's wrong? I need to see you," he said, his voice strained. "Can you come to Riverside Park, our usual bench?" The usual bench referred to a spot overlooking the river, where we'd often sat talking when I was a teenager, particularly during the tumultuous years when Mom and I clashed. Constantly. The fact that he wanted to meet there rather than at home sent a clear signal this was serious, and he didn't want Mom to know about our meeting. "I'll be there in 30 minutes, I promised, already getting out of bed. Derek raised an eyebrow questioningly as I dressed hurriedly. "Dad needs to see me," I explained. "Something's happening." The morning was crisp and foggy as I made my way through the park. Dad was already there, hunched over on our bench, looking older than I'd ever seen him. A manila envelope sat beside him. "Thanks for coming," he said as I sat down, not quite meeting my eyes. "Of course. What's going on?" He picked up the envelope, turning it over in his hand several times before speaking. "I did what I said I would. I looked into our finances, really looked for the first time in years." He let out a hollow laugh. "For all my engineering precision at work, I was criminally negligent at home. Just trusted Catherine completely." "What did you find?" I asked gently. "Evidence of regular transfers to an account I didn't recognize." When I pressed Catherine about it, she became defensive, then angry. Said I was invading her privacy. Can you imagine privacy regarding our joint finances? I waited, sensing there was much more to come. So I hired a private investigator. Dad finally looked up, his expression a mix of embarrassment and determination. "I never thought I'd be the kind of man who would spy on his wife, but here we are." He handed me the envelope. Inside were photographs, bank statements, and a detailed report. The photos showed my mother meeting with a silver-haired man I didn't recognize at various restaurants and hotels. The bank statements documented transfers to a joint account in their names. The report included property records for a lakeside cabin purchased 3 years earlier. "She's been having an affair," Dad said flatly, "for 7 years. With her former colleague from the school district. The money our retirement savings has been going toward their future together. A future that apparently doesn't include me." I stared at the evidence, struggling to reconcile this information with the mother. I thought I knew the woman who preached family loyalty above all else, who insisted on our Sunday dinners, who made such a show of perfect family appearances. "Does she know that you know?" I asked. "Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first." He rubbed his face wearily. "There's more, Ainsley. Evidence suggests Brooke knows about the affair. Has known for years." This hit me like a physical blow. "What? How can you be sure?" He pointed to a section of the report detailing phone records. "They talk regularly, your mother and this man. And Brooke's number appears frequently in the communications. There are text messages referencing our arrangement and keeping quiet. The investigator believes your mother has been essentially buying Brooke's silence." Suddenly, the pattern of favoritism, the extra financial support, the iPhone Christmas gifts, it all took on an even more sinister cast. My mother hadn't just favored Brooke out of some unconscious preference for her planned child. She'd been systematically purchasing her younger daughter's complicity in betraying our family. "Does Brooke know you've discovered this?" I asked. "No. No one knows, except you, me, and the investigator." I tried to process the magnitude of this betrayal, not just my mother's affair, but my sister's willingness to keep it secret in exchange for financial benefits. "What are you going to do?" "I've already done it," Dad said, a hint of his old decisiveness returning. "I've transferred half of our assets to accounts in my name only, which is more generous than what she deserves, given how much she siphoned off. I've filed for divorce. The papers will be served this afternoon." My mind reeled at the swiftness of his actions. "Dad, I know it seems sudden to you, but for me," he gestured to the envelope. "The investigator has been working for 2 weeks. I've had time to come to terms with it. And once I knew I couldn't pretend anymore. I've spent too many years looking the other way, making excuses." He turned to face me fully. "I want you to know that I've made sure you're protected in all this. The will has been fixed. I've documented the financial discrepancies. When the divorce becomes public, everyone will know exactly what's been happening." "Everyone?" I echoed. "Including Brooke's kids." Dad's expression softened. "I hadn't considered that. You're right to think of them. They're innocent in all this. But the truth can't stay hidden forever. That's what got us here in the first place." We sat in silence for several minutes, watching early morning joggers pass by, their lives seemingly uncomplicated compared to the tangled web our family had become. "There's one more thing," Dad said eventually. "I found evidence that your mother has been manipulating information between us for years. Telling me you said things you never said. Telling you I said things I never said." I thought of our conversation about the will, how confused we'd both been. She wanted us at odds, I realized. She needed to make sure we never compared notes too closely. "Exactly," Dad nodded. "And it worked for a long time." As the sun burned through the morning fog, Dad and I made plans. Not for revenge exactly, but for truth. For a dismantling of the elaborate lies that had structured our family for decades. Later that day, my phone exploded with notifications. Mom called 17 times within an hour. Brooke sent a barrage of increasingly frantic text messages. I answered none of them, following Dad's advice to wait until the initial shock had passed. The next morning, an email arrived from Brooke with the subject line, "We need to talk." I opened it to find not an apology or explanation, but an attempt at damage control. "I don't know what Dad's told you, but it's not what you think. Mom made some mistakes, but she was unhappy. You don't understand what their marriage was really like. Please don't judge until you hear our side. Our side. The phrasing confirmed everything. 3 days later, once the divorce filing had become public knowledge within our extended family circle, Mom finally sent a message that wasn't just a demand to call her. I never meant to hurt anyone. The heart wants what it wants. I hope someday you'll understand that people make choices for complex reasons. I've always loved you in my own way. In her own way. A conditional, compromised love that had never been enough. I drafted multiple responses, but sent none of them, recognizing that any explanation she offered would be shaped to cast herself as the victim, the misunderstood heroine of her own narrative. In the weeks that followed, our family splintered along fault lines that had been there all along. Dad moved into a downtown apartment and began rebuilding his life with a dignity that impressed everyone who knew him. Mom moved in with her lover, their relationship now in the open, though the dramatic circumstances of its revelation had cost them several mutual friends. Brooke initially sided completely with Mom, publicly defending her choices, and painting Dad as controlling and emotionally distant, claims that rang hollow to anyone who knew him. But her loyalty wavered when Mom's financial support necessarily decreased due to the divorce proceedings. Without the steady flow of guilt money, their relationship showed its transactional nature. As for me, I maintained contact with Dad while establishing clear boundaries with Mom and Brooke. I didn't cut them off completely, primarily for the sake of my niece and nephew who were confused and hurting, but I no longer pretended that we were the close family Mom had always insisted we were. 6 months after that fateful Christmas morning, our family gathered one last time in our childhood home, before it was sold as part of the divorce settlement. The contrast with our Christmas gathering couldn't have been more stark, the forced joviality replaced by awkward politeness, the pretense of perfect family harmony abandoned entirely. As we sorted through decades of accumulated belongings, deciding what would go to whom, I found myself alone in my parents' bedroom with Mom. She was carefully wrapping her jewelry, including several pieces I remembered her wearing throughout my childhood. "I've been thinking," she said without looking up, "that you might want to have Grandma's pearl necklace. I know how much you always admired it." The peace offering was so small compared to the magnitude of her betrayal that I almost laughed. Instead, I said, "Keep it. I don't need heirlooms to remind me of my family history anymore." She finally met my eyes. Then, and for perhaps the first time in my adult life, I saw her clearly, not as the infallible matriarch she'd pretended to be, nor as the monster her actions might have suggested, but simply as a flawed, selfish woman who had made choices that prioritized her desires over her family's well-being. "I did love you," she said softly. "I know you don't believe that now, but it's true. I believe you loved me as much as you were capable of loving anyone besides yourself," I replied, surprised by the lack of bitterness in my voice. But it wasn't the kind of love I deserved. I turned to leave the room, then paused at the doorway. "For what it's worth, I hope you find happiness with him. Everyone should have at least one honest relationship in their life." 1 year after the Christmas that changed everything, I stood in my newly renovated kitchen, the renovation we'd finally completed using money Dad had insisted on giving me from the house sale, calling it delayed inheritance and long overdue balance. The marble countertops gleamed under pendant lights as I put final touches on dinner preparations. Dad would be arriving soon along with his new friend Margaret, a widow from his book club, whose intelligent conversation and genuine warmth had gradually drawn him out of his post-divorce shell. My children had taken to her, immediately appreciating her straightforward manner and the way she actually listened when they spoke. Brooke would not be joining us. Our relationship remained strained, though recent developments suggested a possible thaw. After months of defending Mom, she'd finally experienced her own moment of clarity. When Mom had chosen a European vacation with her now husband over being present for Maddie's middle school graduation. The conspicuous absence had prompted questions Brooke couldn't deflect, leading to difficult conversations with her children about trust, loyalty, and the consequences of choices. Last week she'd called me our first real conversation in months. I didn't want to see it, she'd admitted. It was easier to believe Mom's version of everything. And the money. It helped so much with the kids. I understand, I'd said, surprised to find I actually did. Brooke had been manipulated just as I had been, though in different ways. Her complicity wasn't excused by this, but it was at least explained. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my thoughts. Emma and Lucas raced to answer it, their excited voices mingling with Dad's deeper tones and Margaret's warm laugh. As we gathered around the table, the new expanded one that easily accommodated our growing circle, I looked at the faces of my true family. Derek, steady and supportive through all the turbulence. My children, who had weathered the family earthquake with remarkable resilience. Dad, looking years younger now that he was free from decades of deception. And Margaret, the unexpected addition who had shown all of us what genuine, unmanipulative kindness looked like. We weren't perfect. The past year had taught me that no family is. But we were honest with each other now, building connections based on truth rather than obligation or appearance. Mom and I maintained minimal contact, birthday calls, occasional updates about the children. I'd forgiven her, not for her sake, but for my own, releasing the anger that had threatened to consume me in those early days of discovery. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting or pretending the hurt hadn't happened. It meant refusing to let that hurt define my future. As Dad raised his glass in a toast, his eyes meeting mine with understanding that went beyond words, I felt a sense of peace that had been absent from family gatherings for as long as I could remember. The facade had crumbled, but what remained was stronger, more authentic, and ultimately more valuable than the perfect family image we'd maintained for so many years. Sometimes it takes a complete unraveling for the truth to finally emerge. And sometimes that truth, however painful, sets everyone free. Thank you all so much for joining me on this journey through one of the most difficult chapters of my life. Has anyone else experienced a moment when family secrets finally came to light? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this video resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and give it a thumbs up so others can find it too. Don't forget to share with someone who might need to hear that family karma eventually catches up, and that creating boundaries with toxic relatives is sometimes the most loving choice you can make for yourself and for them. Until next time, remember that true family is defined by love and honesty, not just blood. Take care of yourselves.